I found it tucked away in the back of an antique shop, nestled between a chipped porcelain doll and a tarnished silver locket. A small, leather-bound diary, its pages yellowed with age, the spine cracked and worn. It called to me, a silent whisper in the dusty air. I picked it up, the leather surprisingly soft beneath my fingertips. There was no title, no author, just the weight of years and secrets held within its fragile covers. Back home, the diary lay on my desk for days. I felt a strange reluctance to open it, a sense of foreboding that I couldn't quite explain. Finally, one rainy afternoon, curiosity won. The first entry was dated 1888. The handwriting was elegant, looping, the ink faded but still legible. October 12th. The shadows in this house grow longer with each passing day. I swear I hear whispers when I'm alone, soft murmurs just beyond the edge of hearing. Is it my imagination, or is this place truly unwell? I shivered, despite the warmth of the room. The entry felt unsettlingly real, the writer's unease palpable even after all these years. I turned the page. October 19th. The whispers have become clearer. They speak my name, not loudly, not threateningly, but a constant, gentle repetition. Eleanor, Eleanor. It follows me from room to room. I've checked every corner, every cupboard, but there's no one here but me. My heart began to beat a little faster. This wasn't just a story. It felt like a descent into something deeply disturbing. I continued reading, drawn into Eleanor's increasingly desperate entries. October 27th. I saw it last night. A fleeting glimpse in the hallway mirror. A figure standing behind me, tall and gaunt, its face obscured by shadow. When I turned, it was gone, but the chill in the air lingered, a cold touch on my skin. November 5th. I can no longer sleep. The whispers are relentless. The figure a constant presence in the periphery of my vision. It feels like it's watching me, waiting. I've started to talk to it, pleading for it to leave me alone, but it never responds, only continues its silent torment. November 12th. I tried to leave today. I packed my bags, walked to the front door, but I couldn't bring myself to open it. An invisible force held me back, a weight pressing down on my chest. I am trapped here with it. The entries grew shorter, more frantic, the handwriting becoming shaky and erratic. November 19th. It's getting closer. I can feel its breath on my neck, hear its whispers right beside my ear. It knows my fears, my deepest secrets. It's inside my head. November 25th. The light is fading. I can barely see to write. It's here, in the room with me. I can feel its cold presence. The entry abruptly ended mid-sentence. The next few pages were blank. I flipped through the rest of the diary, but there were no more entries. Just empty, yellowed pages, whispering their own silent story of a life consumed by fear. I closed the diary, my hands trembling. Eleanor's story had burrowed its way under my skin, leaving me with a profound sense of unease. I looked around my own apartment, the familiar surroundings suddenly feeling a little less safe, a little more shadowed. Days turned into weeks, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Eleanor's presence was still with me, a faint echo in the quiet corners of my home. I started hearing things too, soft whispers when I was alone, just beyond the edge of hearing. My name, not loudly, not threateningly, but a constant, gentle repetition. One evening, I was looking in the mirror when I saw it, a fleeting glimpse in my reflection, a figure standing behind me, tall and gaunt, its face obscured by shadow. I turned, my heart pounding in my chest, but there was nothing there, only the lingering chill in the air, a cold touch on my skin. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, the power of suggestion after reading Eleanor's diary. But deep down, I knew there was something more, something unseen, unheard by others, but undeniably present. Then, I remembered something. Tucked inside the back cover of the diary, I found a small, folded piece of paper. I had forgotten about it until now. I unfolded it carefully. It was a photograph, faded and cracked with age. It showed a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. On the back, in the same elegant handwriting as the diary, was a single word, me. I stared at the photograph, a chill running down my spine. The woman in the picture, it was me. My face, my eyes, my smile. But the photograph was clearly taken over a century ago. A A sudden realization washed over me, cold and terrifying. Eleanor's diary wasn't just a story I had read. It was my story, and the whispers, they weren't just in the house. They were inside my head. The photograph slipped from my trembling fingers, landing softly on the wooden floor. My breath caught in my throat. Eleanor was me? How could that be? The diary was dated over 100 years ago. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of elaborate trick, a cruel joke of my own mind. I picked up the photograph again, my gaze locked on the woman's face. The resemblance was undeniable. The same high cheekbones, the same slight curve to the lips, even the same faint freckle near her left eye. It was me, yet not me. There was a subtle difference in her expression, a hint of melancholy in her eyes that I didn't recognize in my own. Or perhaps I had simply never noticed it before. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. Could this be a case of reincarnation? A past life, somehow bleeding into my present? The idea felt absurd, yet it was the only explanation that even remotely fit the facts. The whispers, the shadow figure, the feeling of being watched. Had I been experiencing echoes of Eleanor's tormented existence? I looked back at the diary, its age pages now holding a terrifying new significance. The shadows in this house grow longer. My apartment. Had Eleanor lived here? Was this her house, now mine? I had never looked into the history of this building, assuming it was just another anonymous city dwelling. Now, a chilling curiosity compelled me. I grabbed my phone and started searching online for the history of my apartment building. It was an old building, that much I knew, but the details were scarce. After a frustrating hour of digging through historical records and local archives, I finally found a mention of the building in a newspaper article from the late 1800s. It described a tragic incident. A young woman named Eleanor Vance, who lived alone in the building, was found dead in her apartment. The cause of death was undetermined, but the article hinted at a possible descent into madness. My blood ran cold. Vance. Eleanor Vance. The name in the diary. It was her. And she had died in this very building, in what was now my apartment. The whispers started again, faint at first, then growing louder, more insistent. Eleanor. Eleanor. They seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. A chorus of ghostly voices swirling around me. I clapped my hands over my ears, trying to block them out, but they persisted, seeping into my consciousness. The shadow figure appeared again, this time not in the mirror, but at the edge of my vision, standing in the doorway to my bedroom. Tall and gaunt, its form indistinct, yet undeniably there. I froze, unable to move, my heart pounding like a drum against my ribs. It didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, a silent, menacing presence. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone, vanished into thin air, leaving behind only a lingering sense of dread. I stumbled backward, collapsing onto the sofa, my body trembling uncontrollably. I had to get out of here. I couldn't stay in this apartment, haunted by the ghost of a past life, tormented by whispers and shadows. I grabbed my keys and ran out the door, not knowing where I was going, just needing to escape. I ended up in a small, dimly lit coffee shop, the warmth and the murmur of voices offering a small measure of comfort. I ordered a coffee, my hand still shaking as I brought the cup to my lips. I tried to calm my racing thoughts, to find some semblance of logic in the terrifying events of the past few hours. Was I truly Eleanor Vance, reincarnated? Or was I simply experiencing some kind of psychological breakdown, triggered by the discovery of the diary? The line between reality and delusion was blurring, and I didn't know what to believe anymore. As I sat there, lost in my thoughts, I noticed a woman sitting at the next table. She was older, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. There was something familiar about her, something that tugged at my memory. She looked at me, a knowing expression in her eyes. "You seem troubled, dear," she said softly. I hesitated for a moment, then found myself pouring out my story, the words tumbling out in a rush of fear and confusion. I told her about the diary, the whispers, the shadow figure, the photograph. The woman listened patiently, her gaze unwavering. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "I understand," she said. "This has happened before." "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "This building," she said, gesturing vaguely in the direction of my apartment. It has a history, a long and tragic history. There are echoes here, souls that are trapped, unable to move on. Eleanor Vance? I asked. The woman nodded. She was a sensitive soul, deeply affected by the energies in this place. She became entangled in the photograph. I asked, my voice trembling. The woman smiled sadly. Sometimes the echoes are stronger. Sometimes the past and the present, they bleed together. So I'm not Eleanor. I asked, a flicker of hope igniting within me. You are you, dear, she said, but you are also connected to her. You have somehow opened a door, and now she is reaching out. What? I asked, fear creeping back into my heart. The woman hesitated. Sometimes, those who are trapped need help to find their way. Sometimes, they need someone to listen to their story. Her words resonated with me. Eleanor's diary had been a cry for help, a desperate attempt to be heard. Had I, by reading it, somehow become the one she was reaching out to? What can I do? I asked. The woman smiled gently. Listen, understand, and perhaps help her find peace. Her words were both comforting and terrifying. I had stumbled into something I didn't understand, a realm of shadows and whispers that felt far beyond my control. But the woman's words also sparked a sense of purpose within me. Eleanor's story had ended in despair. Perhaps I could help her find a different ending. I thanked the woman, a newfound resolve hardening my gaze. I had to go back to the apartment. I had to face whatever awaited me there. Eleanor's story wasn't over, and somehow, I had become part of it. I returned to the apartment, the key feeling heavy and cold in my hand. The hallway was silent, the air thick with a sense of anticipation. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, my senses on high alert. The whispers were faint, barely audible, but I knew they were there. I walked into the living room, my gaze sweeping across the familiar space, now imbued with an unsettling aura. The diary lay on the coffee table where I had left it, its leather cover seeming to pulse with a faint, unseen energy. I picked it up, my fingers tracing the worn spine. I opened it to the last entry, the unfinished sentence hanging in the air like a lingering breath. It's here, in the room with me. I can feel its cold presence. I closed my eyes, trying to connect with Eleanor, to understand her fear. I focused on the photograph, on her kind eyes and gentle smile. I wanted to help her, to offer her the peace she had never found in life. Suddenly, the air grew cold, a bone-chilling cold that seeped into my very core. The whispers intensified, swirling around me like a vortex. Eleanor, Eleanor. They were no longer just whispers. They were voices, soft and mournful, calling out my name. I opened my eyes and saw her. She was standing in the corner of the room, the shadow figure from my visions, but now more defined, more real, tall and gaunt, her face pale and ethereal, her eyes filled with an unspeakable sadness. She didn't speak, but I could feel her presence, her overwhelming sense of despair. It washed over me, a wave of coldness and sorrow that threatened to drown me. Then, she raised a hand, her fingers long and translucent, and pointed towards the diary. I looked down at it, sudden understanding dawning in my mind. Eleanor wasn't just trapped in this building. She was trapped in her story, in the final, terrifying moments of her life. I opened the diary again, my eyes scanning the last entry. It's here, in the room with me. I can feel its cold presence. I hesitated. Then, guided by an unseen force, I picked up a pen and began to write. My hand moved across the page as if guided by another, the ink flowing effortlessly. I wrote about the shadow figure, about its cold presence, about the fear that consumed Eleanor in her final moments. But then, I wrote something different. I wrote about peace, about light, about letting go. I wrote about a kind woman in a coffee shop who had offered words of comfort and hope. As I wrote, the coldness in the room began to dissipate, the whispers softened, and Eleanor's form seemed to flicker, becoming less solid, more translucent. When I finished writing, the pen fell from my hand. The last entry now read, "It's here, in the room with me. I can feel its cold presence. It's time to let go." I looked up. Eleanor was gone. The room felt warm again, the silence broken only by the gentle ticking of the clock on the wall. The diary lay open on the table, the final entry now complete. I picked up the photograph again, my gaze meeting the woman's in the picture. The melancholy in her eyes seemed to have lifted, replaced by a sense of serenity. It was still me, yet somehow different. Days passed, and the whispers never returned. The shadow figure never reappeared. The oppressive feeling in the apartment had lifted, replaced by a sense of quiet peace. I still had the diary, a tangible reminder of the terrifying experience, but now it felt less like a haunting and more like a connection to a past that had finally found resolution. One afternoon, I was looking through some old family photographs when I found one that made my blood run cold. It was a picture of my grandmother as a young woman. Standing beside her was another woman, her arm linked with my grandmother's, both of them smiling brightly at the camera. It was Eleanor Vance. The resemblance was uncanny. The same high cheekbones, the same slight curve to the lips, the same faint freckle near her left eye. My grandmother had never mentioned knowing anyone named Eleanor Vance. I looked closer at the photograph. On the back, written in my grandmother's familiar handwriting, were two names, Margaret and Eleanor, summer of 38. A wave of realization washed over me, more profound and unsettling than anything I'd felt before. The woman in the antique shop, she had said the diary called to me. My grandmother's name was Margaret. The twist wasn't that I was Eleanor reincarnated. The twist was that Eleanor was my great-aunt. The diary hadn't called to me because I was her. It had called to me because I was family, and the echoes I had been experiencing weren't just remnants of her past. They were a latent connection, a familial thread stretching across generations. But there was one final, chilling detail. I remember the kind woman in the coffee shop, the one who had told me about the trapped souls and the need to listen. As I looked at the photograph of Eleanor and my grandmother, I suddenly recognized the woman from the coffee shop. She looked exactly like my grandmother in the picture, only older. Had I encountered the ghost of my own grandmother, guiding me to help her sister find peace? Or was it something else entirely? A more complex intertwining of past and present, of family secrets and lingering spirits? The diary remained on my shelf, a silent testament to a story that had reached across a century. I had helped Eleanor find her peace, but in doing so, I had uncovered a hidden layer of my own family history, a connection to the past that I had never known existed. And sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I still think I hear a faint whisper, a soft murmur just beyond the edge of hearing. Not Eleanor, but Margaret. And I wonder if it's my great-aunt, finally at peace, or my grandmother, checking in, the unfinished thread of our family's story forever connecting us across the veil.